Kelsey's title of her presentation is When Doing Well as Undesired, Expanding the Conceptualization of How Stereotype Threat Undermines Performance.
Thank you. Well, if you were here earlier for Ms. Caitlin Campbell's presentation, she kind of wanted to talk about stereotype threat, but didn't have the time. But I have the time because I have studies all about stereotype threat, so now I need to clue in. So you might be wondering what exactly is stereotype threat. It's not an easy definition to understand right off the bat. But Steele and Aronson defined it in 1995 as being at risk of confirming a self-characteristic negative stereotype about one's group. So for a more concrete example, if a woman was presented with a negative stereotype that women are generally bad at math, then she would perform worse in a math test after having that stereotype salient presented to her than if she was not presented with that stereotype before the task. And in 2008, Schmader, Johns, and Forbes conceptualized a model to explain how stereotype threat plays out. And they defined it as a cognitive imbalance between three different domains. The domain of the self, the domain of the group that self belongs to, and then the domain of the ability in question. So if we're going to go back to the women in math example, the woman in question has a positive connection with the group. She identifies herself as a female. There's a negative connection between the group and the ability because there's a negative stereotype about women performing well in math. So in order to balance out this model, she would perform negatively in the ability, so she would do worse in a math test. And I've been looking at stereotype threat in a slightly different way because all of my research focuses on a connection between myself and the group that is more ambiguous. And so that plays out a little differently in how this model balances out. And what I've been calling this is categorization threat because this threat is in being categorized in a group that you might not want to be categorized in. And I've been focusing a lot on sexual orientation because you can't just look at someone and tell what sexual orientation they are. So that's a big area of categorization threat. And one of the studies that I've done previously, a survey study, I found that there was a big stereotype in sexual orientation in the arts. And the biggest area that I found this in was in ballet. 86% of the undergraduates that I surveyed said that if a man is performing well in ballet, he is most likely to be perceived as homosexual. That's a huge statistic, 86%. So because that stereotype was so strong, that's the stereotype that I decided to focus on in my research. So my hypothesis. Because of this existing stereotype that gay men are better at ballet, performing well on a dance task would imply an undesired group membership for men. And these are all heterosexual men that I used in my study. So we can assume then that they do not want to be identified as homosexual. So to deal with this imbalance that the threat creates, these men may either deliberately or unconsciously perform poorly at a dance task when presented with it. And this is kind of how it would play out in the model set forth by Schmader et al. So in order for you to understand the research I did this summer, it's necessary that I talk about the research that I've already done previous in the spring of 2010. I had 36 undergraduate participants from the introductory research pool, and I ran them through a task which I called Effects of Video versus Live Instruction on Physical Performance. It was necessary to give this false title so that I could explain why they were having to do such a physical task like ballet, but also to hide that I was looking at categorization threat of sexual orientation. So they had no idea that sexual orientation threat was what I was looking at. I showed each participant an instructional ballet video where they learned a brief 16-count dance, and the instruction was given by a female ballet student here at Creighton. They were given 10 minutes of practice time before I asked them to perform the dance they learned in the video for a camera. And I told them that these video performances would be shown to a group of 3 judges here at Creighton to judge how well they performed. I also administered a survey which collected some demographic information and also asked them questions such as how important was it for you to do well in this task, or how much effort did you put into this task, or how important is it for you to be seen as masculine or feminine. And in this study I had 2 conditions. The threat condition and then a non-threat condition which served as a control condition. In the threat condition, I was trying to heighten that threat of being perceived as homosexual. So I told them that performing well in a ballet task would require balanced grace and poise. These are all effeminate characteristics meant to heighten that threat of homosexuality. And then in the non-threat condition, I told the participants that a ballet task would require more masculine characteristics such as athleticism and strength. And this was to lessen any threat of being categorized as homosexuality that they might be experiencing. Unfortunately, my study found no results. There was not a significant difference in performance across my levels, but we did find a significant positive correlation between how much they rated their importance of doing well on the task and how well they actually did according to the judges. And there was also a significant positive correlation between how much effort the participants put into the task and how well the judges rated them doing. So for my summer study, I ended up having a few more participants, 42 instead of 36. This time they were recruited through word of mouth and on-campus flyers, so their ages tended to be a little bit more variable in this study. We had people up to age 28 in this study as opposed to in the spring when they were only between 18 and 22. I kept all of the methods the same, except this time around I gave them 5 minutes of practice time because 10 seemed too long than before. However, I significantly altered how much threat I made present in the groups. So for the threat condition, I again told them that the task required those effeminate characteristics like grace and poise, but I also explicitly mentioned that 86% stereotype. That 86% of undergraduates believe that if a man excels in ballet, he is most likely to be perceived as homosexual. I also told them that their performance would be viewed by a mixed gender group of peers here on campus, and this was to heighten that threat. They don't want to be perceived as homosexual by their peers. And in the non-threat group, I added a few more things to try to reduce that threat. So not only did I tell them that the task required masculine characteristics like athleticism and strength, but I told them that 86% of those surveyed thought that if a man excelled in ballet, that he had more masculine characteristics like strength, and he would be perceived as more sexually attractive to women. And I also told them that their performance would be judged only by female ballet students and female dance instructors here on campus. So no peers would be viewing their performance, so they don't want to do as well as they possibly could. Again, there were no significant results. However, this time a trend was seen in the hypothesized direction. So the men in the threat group tended to do worse than the men in the non-threat group, although it wasn't significant. We also found a significant negative correlation between how important it was for the participants to be seen as masculine and then how well judges rated their performance. So the more important it was for each participant to appear masculine to outsiders, the worse they seemed to do at the task. So if we can compare studies 1 and 2, we can see that it was worth it to run this second study because this perceived audience, this heightened threat in the threat group and even more reduced threat in the control group, seemed to have an impact on the men's performance. So in study 1, where no audience was explicitly mentioned, the best predictors of the task performance were things that you'd expect, like how important it was for them to do well, how much effort they put into the task. But when we ran study 2, when the audience was explicitly mentioned, they seemed to be more concerned about their masculinity. It seemed to be made more salient to them, and that was the best predictor of their task performance instead of things like effort and effort to do well. However, in looking at these results, it's important that we note that there was a potential confound. The questions about effort and import were asked at the same time in both studies, study 1 and study 2. They were both asked right after the task was done. However, the question about appearing masculine occurred at different times for study 1 and study 2. In study 1, the masculine question appeared months before they did their task in a pre-screen survey, but in study 2, it was asked right after the task was done, along with the import and the effort. So although it looks like we have some significant findings here that are really great, we just need to be aware that that potential confound could be having an effect there. So future directions for my study, because we found a trend in study 2, it seems worthwhile to run the study at least one more time to see if I could actually get some significant results. Although I think that I'd have to have much more participants run around next time through, not just 40, but hopefully 80 or close to 100, or if at all possible, 200, but I don't know if that is. I'd also like to increase the categorization threat a little bit more next time around. So adding the audience helped, but I have a hunch that altering how the dance teacher and the model of the moves in the video would have an effect on the threat they experience. So for the threat condition, I would have a model, a dance teacher, who has a male, who has more effeminate qualities, so slender and maybe like a high-pitched voice. But in the non-threat condition, in the control condition, the dance teacher would probably have more masculine characteristics, be very muscular and have a low, deep voice. I also think it would be interesting to look at different outcome measures. So instead of presenting the men with just a dance task and judging their performance to see how that affects their performance by the threat, I would offer them a choice between a more masculine performance task like karate and the feminine task like ballet. And if they choose the masculine task, then we can obviously assume that they're a little bit threatened by that feminine ballet task, and so the threat is present. So I'd like to give a big thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Donald J. Bethanius, who funded this summer research project. My advisor, Dr. Budisheim, has helped me out immensely with this project. Lisa Carter, who was the judge for all of those gradings, took quite a bit of her time. And Miss Amanda Schuler, who was the model in the ballet videos. So I'll take any questions if you have them.
Did you assume or in any way find out if any of the participants of the study were actually homosexual?
Yes, we asked them that on pre-screen questions, and in study 1, none of them were. In study 2, we did have one homosexual individual, so we had to eliminate him from the data.
So you wanted to...
We wanted to make sure that we controlled for that, so there would be speed data.
Kelsey, did you think about like a self-appraisal from the participants in terms of how well they judge their own behavior?
I hadn't thought of that actually. We did ask them like how important it seemed to them to do well, but we didn't ask how well they thought themselves doing. That would be an interesting thing to add next time around if I'm able to